You're watching Mid-Cap Radar and time to focus on the debate around Aadhaar. Voluntary, mandatory or a mix of both. The necessity to have an Aadhaar card is subject of a heated debate while the government is adding that Aadhaar card to an expanding list for compulsory identity authentication in the country. A Supreme Court order in 2015 specifically says that the card cannot be made mandatory for welfare schemes. So who's legally in the right? CNBC TV 18's Kevin Lee does a deep dive legal analysis of the implications in the CNBC TV 18 special report.
What you need now is fundamentally to get in the trenches and fix the delivery system. How to make sure the right people get the right things at the right time with an element of choice.
Now, when the architect of Aadhaar made that statement, only 10 crore Aadhaar cards had been issued. That number is closer to 100 crore today. And while he was right about needing to fix the gaps in the delivery system, the element of choice is a matter of legal interpretation.
The Supreme Court, in an interim order passed on 11th August 2015, said that the Aadhaar card could not be made mandatory and that no citizen of India could be denied any benefits they were eligible for if they did not possess an Aadhaar card. The Supreme Court asked the government to widely publicize its order, which it reiterated in October the same year.
2015 was early days yet. The Aadhaar rollout had just begun. There were teething problems. So the court felt that if you make welfare disbursals impinge upon or rather hinge upon entirely upon the Aadhaar card, then there may be a degree of exclusion which may be unfair.
I have introduced the bill.
But that changed in March 2016 when the Aadhaar Act was passed in Parliament. According to the Act, the government could make Aadhaar mandatory to verify the identity of people availing government schemes. By this time, Aadhaar cards were common enough to be effectively used for authentication. The question was, did this violate the Supreme Court order?
Courts can't stop legislation, and it is not the business of courts to either direct or stop legislation.
That act does not say that the government can make, or doesn't say that the act itself makes Aadhaar mandatory for various government schemes or entitlements. It says that the government may make Aadhaar compulsory by an executive order.
Parliament cannot be held in contempt for passing laws, but it isn't as simple as that. Starting late 2016, various ministries of the government began issuing notifications making Aadhaar enrollment mandatory for beneficiaries of over 40 schemes. These range from Manrega to maternity benefit schemes, scholarships for SC and OBC students, and victims of the Bhopal gas tragedy seeking compensation. And while Parliament cannot be held in contempt of court, the government does not enjoy that privilege.
There is no question of holding Parliament in contempt. I entirely agree. But if there is an order of the Supreme Court saying that thou shalt not do something, and if you go ahead to do it, then you are answerable to the Supreme Court. Therefore, each department of the government which violates the Supreme Court order can be held in contempt.
If these charges of contempt are held valid, then the Ministries of Labour, Human Resource Development and Defence could face tough questions. But the legal fraternity is still divided on the matter.
Contempt is not some sort of a, oh, let's have fun jurisdiction. Contempt is where somebody deliberately, defiantly violates the order of the court. These people have tried telling the court, look, this is happening, that is happening. Court said, let it happen. We will see when the case comes.
Similar situation had arisen when the Supreme Court had ordered that the assets and liabilities and the criminal antecedents of candidates would have to be disclosed in an affidavit. The Parliament passed an act to overrule that. Thereafter, the act had to be challenged. And then the Supreme Court struck down that act as being unconstitutional, violative of fundamental rights, etc.
The question then is, can the Supreme Court strike down the Aadhaar Act itself? But before the court decides if the Aadhaar Act violates the right to privacy, it has to decide if the right to privacy is a fundamental right.
The Apex Court will have a bench hearing on that very subject later this summer. And if it decides that the Aadhaar is in violation of that right to privacy, it could spell much bigger issues for India's identity project than just a case of contempt. In Mumbai, Kevin Lee.